Good afternoon. This is the 96th day of the Ukrainian resistance. This is Media Center in Ukrinform. Our briefing now is with Ivan Fedorov, Mayor of Melitopol. Sorry for slight delay caused by with connected to our first question. Mr. Mayor, this morning a powerful explosion happened in your city, in the neighborhood where Yevgeny Baritsky, the so-called governor of the region appointed by the occupiers, lives. There are a couple of versions of what happened and some facts. Well, a fact is that the explosion happened in downtown of Melitopol, close to the building that belongs to self-proclaimed head of the Oblast military administration, appointed by the Rushists, and near that building the explosion happened. We are still verifying any casualties, but again, there are different versions of what's happened. The first story is that the Russians are taking care of those collaborators who are not delivering on what they promised, and that's what happened in Energodar and then in Tokmak. Now it continues in Melitopol. And the second story is that there is a strong resistance of civic society in Melitopol, who often enough unite their efforts with the law enforcement agencies, but we'll hear that story from our law enforcement agencies later on. Right now, Russians are checking out all of the premises close to the explosion site. They're searching for terrorists. They already stated that the accident happened by the Ukrainian terrorists. Well, we all heard that, all that nonsense, but the fact is that the land will be burning under the feet of the occupiers in Melitopol until they leave the town. Well, the next question about the resistance in Melitopol. Yesterday there was a protests with Ukrainians carrying Ukrainian flags. Can you tell us more about that event? This topic calls for separate words of appreciation and respect. Our heroic people in the city of Melitopol, even after 3 months of occupation, they keep taking to the streets, to the downtown of Melitopol to demonstrate their civic position. So before telling you the facts about what happened yesterday, first let me start with comparing the behavior of Russians and the behavior of our patriots. The Russians would hang the Russian flag at the central square of Melitopol at night when nobody can see that, while our residents took to the streets, came to the central park at daytime, carrying out the meeting to support democratic values of Ukraine. So this definitely calls for the words of appreciation. This is qualified as heroism, which merits respect. The heroism of the residents of the temporarily occupied city of Melitopol, who support all of the Ukrainian democratic values, waiting for the Ukrainian troops to liberate the territory. In Melitopol, like in many settlements in the south of Ukraine, it became clear that Russia entered those regions with the sole goal of occupation. So can you tell us what do they do after they occupy? What do they do? Hand out passports? What else? Last week, they started preparing to hand out Russian passports. That's only preparatory work. They passed some order signed by the killer Putin about handing out Russian passports in Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, and they started the preparation work. They started calling our censor office employees, asking them to come to work. They failed, so they cannot launch the process of handing out those passports. Nobody wants to cooperate. Nobody wants to be a collaborator. But they promised that they will hand out the Russian passport, but nothing will. They will fail because this passport is just a piece of paper that nobody needs. On the other hand, This is a clear violation of the Ukrainian legislation about the dual citizenship. That's why our residents will not be willingly accepting those papers, even if they would be forced to take them by the Russian occupiers. They also started handing out, or actually, to be more precise, selling mobile cell phone SIM cards from Russian operators. They want the Russian operators to start covering in our temporarily occupied cities and towns. The Melitopol residents are buying those SIM cards quite actively, which is quite clear because we went through a number of cases when there was no cell coverage, and it's tough. And so to stay in touch, to be able to communicate with the outside world, the residents are actively buying those SIM cards. Yeah, that's a fact. Thank you. Now, any questions from the audience?
NHK and Japan's public broadcaster. Thank you today. What is the biggest issue right now in Melitopol? And second, we hear that Ukrainian military plans to go on the counteroffensive after mid-June. Is there any possibility of retaking Melitopol? Thank you.
Яке місце середній червня, не зрозумів? Не повністю почув питання, тому що, мабуть, зв'язок перервався.
I couldn't fully hear the question. Can you repeat it, please?
What is the biggest issue right now?
Я не чую питання, в мене нічого не відбувається.
I cannot hear the question.
We hear that Ukrainian military plans to go on the
Не чую.
counteroffensive.
Можете на англійському задавати питання, я зрозумію, щоб не перекладати.
Is there any possibility of retaking?
Випадки, коли люди, які живуть зараз в Мелітополі, залишають його, і чи це є небезпека для місцевих мешканців? І перше питання було, яке найбільш складне питання ви бачите зараз в Мелітополі?
Які основні проблеми там?
The toughest issue right now is the situation with safety. First and foremost, because daily people are being abducted for 3 months of occupation, and 500 people were abducted. Some are arrested for 3 days, others for more than a month. We have one example when a 16-year-old teenager has been arrested for 50 days already as a hostage. So that's the toughest issue, how to ensure safety of the residents at the temporarily occupied territories. Second worst issue is humanitarian issue. People run out of cash, local residents, and they cannot take cash from the ATMs. The foodstuff that is brought from temporarily occupied Crimea, those products cost 3 or 4 times higher than in Ukraine. So a number of issues. No cash, and secondly, they need to pay for foods a couple of times higher than they used to. Now, as to your question, evacuation of people, is it happening? Well, yeah. Over the course of the last 3 months, there were a couple of phases. First of all, they blocked the official evacuation that was agreed between the representatives of Ukraine and the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. So for 3 months, this is fully blocked option. Relatively safe during those months. People could take their private cars moving from Melitopol to Zaporizhzhia. It will take at max 2 days, and it was relatively safe. A couple of cars were shot at and shelled, but mostly people managed to flee. In the last 2 weeks, evacuation has not been carried out because Russians are blocking it at the delineation line in Vasilivka village. There are 400 cars stalled there with 3 months-old newlyborns there. The line of cars stayed still because the occupiers use our peaceful residents as a shield to stay safe so that they will not be hit by the artillery from Ukrainian troops. That's why the city is completely blocked. You cannot leave it. And all in all, during the time of 3 months of occupation, 50% of residents left it. Almost 70,000 residents left temporarily occupied Melitopol. Another question, please. Thank you. Question from Ukrinform. The situation in 2 universities. Kircha has talked about national university, while in pedagogical university there is no rector in place. So do you know how many professors are cooperating with the occupiers or are ready to collaborate with them? Well, for that, I would ask you to look broader on the whole educational system. The development started a month and a half ago when the Russians tried to relaunch the educational learning process in Zaporizhzhia region at large and Melitopol city in particular. At that time, not a single professor agreed to collaborate with Russia, so they failed to relaunch the training in schools and kindergartens, and right now they don't know what needs to be done because not a single educational official agreed to cooperate with them. They appointed a criminal, Shapurova, who is currently performing the duty of the chief educational officer, but she fails as well. A couple of days ago, they started the procedure on uniting our 2 universities, the technical and pedagogical universities. They told us actually that 5 colleges and universities will be merged into one, and so that people will have to file applications to reapply to this one university. For the time being, Ukraine meets all of its obligations to both of the universities, pedagogical and agri-technical, and there is no those who desire to join this uniform university. The rector of pedagogical university also refused to collaborate with occupiers. We don't know the exact number of people who refused to collaborate and vice versa who proved to be collaborators. We'll learn today because today is the deadline. But in secondary schools and in kindergartens, such numbers would not exceed 7%. We had 3,000 educational workers before. Those who agreed to collaborate with occupiers does not exceed 200 out of 3,000. Any further questions in the audience? If not, thanks a lot. That was live with us. Mayor of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov. Our next briefing will start at 13:30. That would be the briefing of the families of Mariupol defenders, and then